Happy Monday. We continued Revelation this past week in Revelation 16, and there are a few things that I wanted to dig into that I didn't have time to get into in my sermon yesterday. So I threw up a picture of the parallels between the bowls, trumpets, and the Exodus plague. I'm just going to walk through them really briefly, and I'll put the picture up on the screen. And if you want to look at that, you can just pause the video and take a look at that. I won't leave it up there the whole time. So I'm just going to walk through the connections between like bowl one connects to trumpet one, which connects to the sixth plague, which I just think is fascinating the way John is using these well-known imagery and ideas to communicate the things that are going to be taking place in God's sovereign plan of all of human history. So beginning with the bowls, which is what we preached on yesterday, the first bowl is on land and festering sores. Similarly, the first trumpet is on earth, third of the land is built up, which all that connects to the sixth plague, dust over the land with festering boils on the people. Second and third bowl are connected. The sea and turns to blood on the second bowl. Rivers and springs turn to blood in the third bowl. That connects the second trumpet, which is sea to blood, and a third of the sea creatures die. Third trumpet, rivers and springs turn bitter, and then that all of those connect to the first plague. So Nile River turns to blood. The fish die in that first plague. Then going on to the fourth bowl, which is on the sun, so people are scorched. It gets super bright, which connects to the fourth trumpet. There's a plague on the sun, the moon, the stars. A third of the sun goes dark, which all that connects to the ninth plague, which is darkness. Then you go to the fifth bowl, which is cast on the throne of the beast. There's darkness over his land, and people are in agony. Connects to the fifth trumpet, where the abyss is open, darkness descends on the land, and then locusts come out and torment people. Those connect to the eighth and ninth plagues, where there is darkness over the land and locusts. The sixth bowl is poured out on the Euphrates. River dries up, and then frogs come out from this unholy trinity. In the sixth trumpet, there are four angels that are released from the Euphrates, and then a third of people are killed. All this connects to the second plague, where there are frogs that come out of the Nile River and just like overwhelm Egypt, and then the magicians reveal their secret arts. Similar to the frogs coming out from the mouths of the unholy trinity. Lastly, the seventh bowl is poured out on the air. There's lightning, rumblings, thunder, severe earthquake. That exact same language, the lightnings, rumblings, thunder, earthquake, all those pieces are in the seventh trumpet as well. And all that connects to the seventh plague, where there's thunder, hail, and lightning. So it's just interesting to me. I would argue that the best way to read and interpret Revelation faithfully and correctly, as John intended us to, is not to read it linearly, not to read it chronologically, not to read it from front to back as just like an explanation of what's going to take place only at the end. I would argue that these are things that are taking place over and over and over throughout history. I mean, it makes me think of the Mark Twain quote that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. I think that's some of what we're seeing in Revelation here. Is John is taking these ideas that are going to take place again and again and again. Like empires are going to rise, empires are going to fall, people are going to die, people are going to be born. Like these things are going to continue changing as time goes on. And if you remember, I think there is a progression. Like things are getting worse. I was reading last week, there's been a severe increase in cancer among young people in particular, which they're not really sure why right now. There's a whole bunch of speculation, but there's been an increase in cancer. Like cancer has been starting to affect younger and younger people, which I just find very interesting. I think it's another way, another model, another demonstration of the way God is going to allow things to continue getting worse and worse. Now, one comment on the sixth angel with the drying up of the river Euphrates. It says it will allow the kings of the east to come and invade. What the first century readers would have heard in that is they would have immediately thought of a group called the Parthians. They would have been an empire that would have competed with Rome. Euphrates served as literally like there was a meeting that took place between two people, one from the Parthians, one from the Romans, to determine the boundary markers between their two civilizations, and it was the river Euphrates. So people, this would have been in modern day Iran. And what's interesting is the Parthians, what they were most feared for, like they were vicious, unbelievably difficult warriors. I've shared some pictures from my trip this summer where I got to see some ruins from the Assyrians, which have been the exact same area as the Parthians. But these people rode on horsebacks and were master archers. So some people believe earlier in Revelation, where it talks about these scorpions that could like fire on all sides, some people think that's actually a reference back to the Parthians because they were such good horsemen that they could turn around in their seats and shoot from every direction with their bows and arrows. And so people would have in their minds pictured the Parthian army. Um, Now, another piece that I think is just really important for us to think and realize is that there are far more deep spiritual connections and relationships that we often give credence to or are aware of. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard like people talk about the most important part of us is our souls. Our bodies don't matter. And that's just categorically false. Like I love a quote from C.S. Lewis. He said, "God cares about matter; He created it." So we almost like have this dualistic approach where the important thing is the spiritual, and the like less important part is the material. And that's just not true. Like God has given us the material world to steward, to care for, to nourish, to try to extend His rule and reign over all of the earth. So some of the way that we are commanded to do that is with words. So in verse 13, it talks about, I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, three unclean spirits like frogs. I think it's significant that they come out of the mouths because words have great power. I remember growing up hearing the phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I remember reading Calvin and Hobbes where Susie says that. And then as soon as she says it, she turns around and says, oh, phooey, because it's not really true. Like sticks and stones, yeah, they can break your bones. It'll hurt a lot, but words have far more deeper impact than many of us are even aware of. And if you just think of the way God talks about words in the Bible, think back to Genesis 1. How does God create the world? With words. What do we do with our mouths? We build each other up and we tear each other down with words. God's word, using literal words, is how his plan goes out into all the world. Jesus is referred to as the living word. And then when Jesus comes back in just a few chapters, he conquers the world with the sword coming out of his mouth with words. So words have far more significance and impact than I think we often are aware of, which we just need to be careful that the words that we're using are words that God would want us to use. I can't remember the exact reference right now, but there's a passage that talks about you will give an account for every word that comes out of your mouth. That is significant. I think it has bearing and credence on how we live our lives today. The last thing I want to talk about is there's all sorts of conversation related to Armageddon. Is that the specific physical place where we need to be prepared to see the armies of the world marching towards and gathering together in order to try to take down at the last battle? And I would argue no. So remember, throughout this, John is using all sorts of imagery and symbolism to try to signify or stand in for something else. So think of just a few verses later. It talks about verse 19. God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of wine of the fury of his wrath. Babylon hadn't existed for centuries at this point. So Babylon is referring to any major city civilization that stands opposed to God and his people. So why would we think that just a few verses earlier, he's referring to a specific place somewhere in the future? And remember, he literally, it says in Hebrew, that is two words together, Har Megiddon. It is the Mount of Megiddon. That doesn't exist. There isn't a mountain. There's like it's referred to as a tell. It's 70 feet high, but it's really a plain. And there's battles that had taken place throughout most of Israel's history there. So then one of my professors from seminary in this book says the expression had probably become proverbial for any place where a great decisive battle could be fought. Just like today, we refer to someone meeting their Waterloo after the battlefield where Napoleon finally was defeated in 1815. So again, like when we're reading some of these things, we will miss some of the allusions or the references because it's not our culture, it's not our civilization. We don't always understand the things that they are referring to, but the first century readers would have. So some of our job as modern day readers is to go back and try to figure out the previous context in which John was writing. Like that's our job to interpret these passages correctly. So then taking that idea, Tom Schreiner in his commentary on Revelation says, I think he summarizes this really helpfully. He says, Armageddon symbolizes the entire world. The reference to Megiddo is mythical, representing the apocalyptic and universal mountain where hostile forces, assembled by the agents of Satan, will come together to wage war at the end against God and his people. The final conflict isn't mythical, it will really take place, but the language used to describe it is figurative. We should not conclude that there will be a specific battle in Megiddo because the same battle is also relayed in 19 verses 11 through 21. So that's I think a good summary, a good way of interpreting what John is referring to here. It's not like looking to a specific physical place. It is referring to a spiritual reality. Remember, one of the keys with apocalyptic literature is that they take spiritual and turn it into physical language just to help us understand. And again, one of the things I said yesterday is part of the reason we have revelation is to wake us up, because we just miss all the spiritual implications. We miss the way our words have deeper spiritual and everlasting significance. So I think it's important for us to take revelation at its word, to take it seriously, to begin implementing and applying it into our lives on a regular basis. There's one of the books that I've just really enjoyed going through this sermon series is Discipleship on the Edge. And one of the things that the author there argues is that Revelation is ultimately a book about discipleship. It's a book geared towards helping Christians remain faithful in the midst of an unfaithful culture, an unfaithful world. So just a helpful reminder for why we're studying Revelation right now. There is a membership class coming up on Monday, so if you are not yet a member, I'd love to see you attend the class and sign up through the app in order to do that, or send me an email if you've got questions about that. It'll be immediately after the service next week. I've had a few people reach out to me already, so we will be having it, which is always exciting and fun for me to do. And again, if you've got any questions about any of the stuff that I ever talk about on Sunday, there's a lot of study and preparation that goes into it, so just shoot me an email, and I'd love to come alongside you and help answer any of the questions that you have. Hope you guys have a wonderful week, and blessings on your week.